Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Are you a business in the liquor space and wondering if you're operating within the stipulations of the new Liquor Licensing Act, which came into effect on the 1st of November 2023? With a recent crackdown by the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade on liquor businesses breaking the provisions of the legislation affect your business? Well, stay tuned for this upcoming interview where business journalist Nelsie Wentlhamandla sits down with the chairperson of the Liquor Licensing Board, Mdeni Vilagati, to find out all there is to know about how liquor businesses can operate within the confines of law.
Chairperson, thank you for joining us on the show. Some businesses in the liquor space face the harsh reality of being closed if they continue not to follow the regulations. Can you briefly tell us what are some of the challenges that were faced by these businesses that face closure?
I take it you are referring to the business at Kwaluseni. Well, in relation to that business, there have been several violations of the Act and the regulations which regulate the sale of liquor in the kingdom. These violations include not observing operating hours. Secondly, the patrons of the business being a hindrance to other members of the public by, for instance, parking their cars at the entrance of the university at night after hours, and as a result preventing vehicle access to the university and noise generally. Mm-hmm. And fourthly, there have been convictions by the licensee or the manager on the premises has been convicted of offences in the liquor legislation. So what has happened is that due to the complaints we've received about that business, the licensee decided not to apply for a renewal of its license.
What happens, Chairperson, before a business is liable for closure?
If the licensee has been convicted at least 3 times for liquor-related offences in a calendar year, that business is liable for closure. That's one. Another basis on which the board may revoke a license is where there have been complaints from the residents. Residents who reside within a radius of 1 kilometer from the business premises. There must be at least 10. They write a letter to the board detailing the failure to comply with license provisions by the licensee. And also in that letter, the letter should state what it is that they're asking from the board. But before a board can take the drastic step of revoking a license, the licensee must be given a hearing. So the board must be satisfied that the complaints reflected in the resident's letter have merit. So typically the complaints we have received in the past relate to operating hours and noise.
Kulendzaba yaseKwaluseni nje, Chairperson, I hear you speaking about issues of parking. Are there any zoning or location restrictions that are considered before a business is granted a license?
Okay, thank you for that question. Under the old legislation, there was no provision for the board to consider things like that. Right? But under the new legislation, one of the requirements for the grant of a license is that it must be at a designated business area. So you can't just have your license anywhere. And yet under the old legislation, it wasn't stipulated. So if you are in town or within an area under a municipality, the business premises must be zoned for the purpose of it must be zoned for that purpose. So it must comply with town planning, with a town planning scheme. So if your business premises don't comply with the applicable town planning scheme, you will not be granted a license. Now, to answer your question, under the old legislation, there was an old legislation in 1964 legislation, it was not a requirement. But the current legislation that we're using, the 2023 Act, it is a requirement.
You mentioned, Chairperson, that for a business to be considered for closure, there has to be, amongst other things, a complaint from 10 people in the community. What if the 10 people from the community are organized by my competition? If I'm operating a business and my competition feels like I'm taking his or her customers, then they organize these 10 people. What steps do you follow before you can close a business?
The letter of complaint by residents is just one of many ways. One of many ways in which we may consider the revocation of a license. We don't act solely on the report, on the complaint by residents. We convene a hearing to test the authenticity of the complaint. So before we reach a conclusion that the complaint has merit, we must be satisfied that what is complained of is true. So we convene a hearing where people take an oath and they're questioned by us to test the veracity of what they say. But the complaint by residents is just one of several processes available in the Act for a complaint to reach us. The complaint by the residents may be made at any time, the 10 residents at any time. Another way in which a complaint may be lodged is to object to the renewal of a license. That's done at year end when the board is considering renewals. Right? There you don't need 10 residents. It could be anyone. It could be a competitor. It could be a member of the public. They file an objection to say, we object to the renewal of this. It could be the local authority. It could be the traditional authorities in that area. We say we object to the renewal of this license because of A, B, C, D, and E. Even there, we don't act on the objection. We have to convene a hearing to test its veracity. Number 3, a member of the public at any time may complain to a member of the board about a business. A member of the board or the entire board needs to take appropriate action. And what typically we do in a situation like that is that we launch our own investigation.
Businesses in the liquor space have also complained that there's unfair competition, especially from canteens, as they are now selling to the public. And there's also the issue of wholesalers who are now selling to individuals. Have you heard or have you dealt with such cases? And if so, how?
At the end of year statutory hearings, the licensees did not communicate to us the complaint about unfair trading from canteens. But I take it's a genuine complaint. Statutorily, in terms of the regulations, a canteen is only licensed to sell to members of that service and ex-members. So people are currently serving in that organization and former employees. So a canteen is not supposed to be selling to me and you. The complaints from our licensees is that illegal traders are purchasing from wholesalers in bulk. That's the complaint we had. It may well be that there are complaints about wholesalers selling to members of the public for personal consumption. We haven't had that complaint, but the complaint that was addressed, that was communicated to us, was that wholesalers are selling to illegal traders. So in response, the wholesalers have said to us, no, the licensees give their licenses to the unlawful traders. So the unlawful trader comes to us with a license, right? They purchase with using the license of a licensed trader. So we haven't interrogated that.
Are businesses that are operating near schools going to be closed, Chairperson, especially those that were granted licenses a long time ago?
Those businesses can only have their licenses suspended or revoked if they trade in violation of the law. That's existing licenses. Now, with respect to new grants or people who want to open businesses, the 2023 legislation prohibits the grant of a license in close proximity to a school, to a hospital, to a clinic, places of worship, in close proximity to a highway or a freeway. That's the new legislation.
Unfortunately, Chairperson, we've run out of time, but I hope we will have you back on the program because there is a lot that businesses in this sector want to know, especially in relation to this new legislation.
All right, and that was the chairperson of the Liquor Licensing Board, Mdeni Vilakati, giving us an insight on unfair competition and why the ministry revokes liquor licenses from businesses. After the break, we connect with Sanidus Via for today's financial markets. Stay with us.